You are standing at the edge of the world's greatest wound. A scar 50 miles long, cut straight through a mountain range, through a jungle so thick the sun doesn't reach the ground. Carved by the hands of 56,000 men, most of them black men from Barbados, Jamaica, and Trinidad, men whose names were never carved into any monument. It is 1881. The jungle is breathing, hot, wet, alive. The air smells of rot and rain and something else, the smell of ambition, of money, of men who have never been to Panama making promises to men who have. And a 75-year-old Frenchman named Ferdinand de Lesseps is standing on the deck of a steamship, looking at the Isthmus of Panama and seeing not jungle, but legacy. He had done the impossible once before. He had cut a canal through the Egyptian desert, joined the Mediterranean to the Red Sea, and made the world smaller. They called him Le Grand Français, the greatest Frenchman. He was not an engineer. He was something more dangerous, a man who believed impossible was just a word other people used. He looked at Panama and said, "We dig." 800,000 French believed him. They invested their savings, their life's earnings, the butcher, the school teacher, the widow. 800,000 ordinary people put their money into de Lesseps' dream of slicing a continent in two. What happened next is the part they don't teach you. The jungle killed 200 workers a month. Not in accidents, in agony, yellow fever, malaria. Men who were fine at breakfast, burning with fever by noon, dead by nightfall. The French didn't understand it. They thought the tropical air was poisonous. Bad air, miasma, they called it. They put flowers in buckets of water around the hospital beds to keep away the smell of death. Those buckets of standing water became the perfect breeding ground for the very mosquitoes killing them. By 1884, the death rate had reached over 200 people per month. Trains left the worksite each evening not carrying ore or earth, but bodies, stacked like lumber. Many workers understood the risks and mortality associated with the project. The French dug anyway. For 8 years they dug. They moved 75 million cubic yards of earth, a staggering, brutal achievement. But the mountain kept coming back. The Culebra Cut, the rock ridge at the heart of the isthmus, rose 333.5 feet above sea level. When they dug into it, the saturated hillside simply slid back down overnight. Months of work, swallowed in a single morning. And then, in 1889, it stopped. Not because the men gave up, because the money ran out. 800,000 French people lost everything. De Lesseps, now 84 years old, sat in a seaman's peacoat in his house in the French countryside, his wife keeping newspapers away from him so he wouldn't see the headlines. His name, the name that once made audiences rise to their feet, had become a national insult. 5 years later, he was dead, still unaware that Panama had become a synonym in France for fraud, scandal, ruin. 22,000 workers, gone. The jungle closed back over the half-dug trench. Rusting machinery sat in the mud. Abandoned hospitals. The Culebra Cut, still there, still waiting. Just a scar on the earth that nobody finished. For 15 years, nothing. Then, in 1904, a different kind of man arrived. President Theodore Roosevelt did not come to Panama wearing a white suit. He came with a philosophy that the United States had a destiny to control the seas, and that destiny required a canal. He was 45 years old, furious with energy, and he had just watched the battleship Oregon take 67 days to steam from San Francisco around Cape Horn to fight in Cuba. 67 days. He was not going to let geography humiliate America again. But Roosevelt had learned from the French. The first thing he sent to Panama wasn't steam shovels. It wasn't dynamite. It was a doctor. Colonel William Gorgas arrived on the isthmus with a single obsession: mosquitoes. He had already helped eliminate yellow fever from Havana after researchers confirmed that mosquitoes, not air, carried the disease. Washington thought he was wasting money. Congress laughed at him. His budget requests for fumigation, oil, screens, and drainage were denied, questioned, mocked. Gorgas did it anyway. He divided Panama into 11 districts. In every building, every room, inspectors searched for standing water. Carpenters nailed screens over windows. Workers spread oil over swamps and drainage ditches. Every barrel of water where a mosquito could breed was treated, drained, or destroyed. The entire American supply of pyrethrum and sulfur was shipped to Panama and burned. By 1906, yellow fever was gone from the canal zone. Not reduced, gone. The death rate among workers dropped 80%. Men could now work without writing their wills first. And then, with the jungle's greatest weapon disarmed, they turned to the mountain. The Culebra Cut. 9 miles of mountainous rock at the heart of the isthmus, the spine of 2 continents. To connect the oceans, you have to go through it. There is no other way. For 7 years, the Culebra Cut was never silent. Not for an hour. Not for a single minute. Up to 6,000 workers at a time, operating in 24-hour shifts. The sound was beyond noise. It was a living wall of it. 300 drills screaming into rock simultaneously. 60 steam shovels, each one as large as a house, biting into the earth and swinging their load onto waiting trains. Explosions so constant that men stopped flinching. You'd feel the ground shake, the air compress against your chest, and just keep working. The Americans used 17 million pounds of dynamite in 3 years alone. They moved 177 million cubic yards of earth. That is enough material to bury Manhattan under 9 feet of dirt. They moved it on trains, 160 trains a day, running loops in and out of the cut, a locomotive leaving every 9 minutes, all day, all night, all year. The landslides kept coming. A hillside would give way without warning, burying machinery, burying men, erasing weeks of work. Workers named the worst slide Cucaracha, the cockroach, because no matter how many times they removed it, it came back. Sometimes the earth moved so slowly you could watch it creep, 3 inches an hour, unstoppable and immense. One man who survived called it going to a battlefield every morning. Artificial limb makers competed for the right to supply the canal project. Their advertisements promised their arms and legs were most suited to the climate. Men lost hands to cables, feet to trains, legs to rock falls. They were fitted with waterproof prosthetics and sent back to work. Many returned to work despite severe injuries. Here is the decision that changed everything. Where the French had imagined a canal at sea level, a simple cut, ocean to ocean at the same height, the Americans understood that Panama was not Egypt. The land in the middle rose 85 feet above sea level. The rivers were violent. A sea-level cut would require moving 4 times more earth and still face constant flooding. Chief Engineer John Stevens proposed something the French had rejected: a lock canal. Raise the ships, float them across an artificial lake, lower them back down, not cutting through the mountain. Using the mountain. The Chagres River would be dammed at Gatun, creating Gatun Lake, which at the time was the largest man-made lake in the world. Ships would enter from the Atlantic, be lifted 85 feet by 3 pairs of locks, sail across Lake Gatun, and be lowered back down on the Pacific side. The Gatun locks were the largest concrete structures ever built by human hands. Each lock chamber is 1,000 feet long and 110 feet wide. The gates, 65 feet tall, 7 feet thick, 700 tons each, are so precisely engineered that a single man can open them with a hand crank. The water that lifts the ships flows by gravity alone. No pumps, no engines, just water and mathematics. On August 15, 1914, the steamship SS Ancon left the Atlantic port of Cristobal at 7:10 in the morning. She was carrying a cargo of cement. There was no great ceremony. World War I had started 2 weeks earlier, and the world's attention had turned to mud and trenches in Europe, not to a jungle canal in Central America. Colonel Goethals watched from a railroad car on the bank. The Ancon rose through the Gatun locks, 85 feet, lifted by water, held by gravity. She sailed across the lake, through the Culebra Cut, and descended the Pacific locks. 9 hours after she had entered the Atlantic, she was in the Pacific. An eyewitness on board wrote that the Ancon moved so quietly, so effortlessly, that a stranger coming suddenly upon the scene would have thought the canal had always been there. 25,000 dead to get to that moment. 33 years. The most expensive construction project in American history. $375 million. The equivalent of over $8 billion today. Finished 1 year ahead of schedule and $23 million under budget. Each mile of that canal cost 500 lives. Today, a ship still leaves one ocean and arrives in another. The locks still fill with gravity. The original lock gates are still in service and remain motor-operated, with manual operation as a backup. About 14,000 ships pass through every year. Bulk carriers, tankers, container ships stacked 6 stories high, each one lifted and lowered as if by a silent machine that never forgets. Press your hand against the stone walls of the locks, and it is warm from the sun. Below your feet, somewhere in the mud and the coral and the cut rock, is the residue of 17 million pounds of explosives. The bones of men whose names were never written down. The canal does not know their names, but it carries their weight every day in every ship that passes, every ocean that connects, every ton of cargo that arrives a week early because a wall of land became a corridor of water. They cut a continent in two, and the world has never been the same.